Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the companion, the Adarza Kavat. Now recently there was a rework to pets. That's why we're going through a lot of the pets now. So we did the Adarza Kavat earlier today, and lastly it's going to be the Adarza Kavat for today, and then I'll work on the last Kavat probably early next week. So we have the top commenter of the last video, Montero U, and the first commenter of the last video, which is the same person, Montero U. And we have the recent supporters of Johnny, Eddie, and Lol Vio. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, so let's get into the Adarza Kavat. And every pet needs to have a niche for it to be viable in Steel Path. If the pet does not fulfill some kind of a niche in the current game, there is no point in playing that pet. So what does the Adarza Kavat do? Like, what is his niche? His niche is Final Critical. So before we actually get into the mods, I want to go over Final Critical real quick. I have a little slide that I have set up here. Here we go. Okay, so what is Final Critical? I have two different weapons here. I have the Dread, which is going to have a base of 50% critical chance, which is really, really high. And I have the Sporothrix, which has a base of 1% critical chance. So if we look at the Dread first, so it has a base 50% critical chance. If you put a critical delay mod on, which is a 200% crit chance mod, it's going to turn that 50% into 150%. Okay, so now you have 150% critical chance after you've put the critical delay mod on. And now you're going to have your Adarza buff, which is another 60% critical chance, but it's not just critical chance, it's final critical. So final critical means that it does not get factored into the multiplicative equations that were previous before it. So it just gets added at the very end of the equation. So it takes that 150 that you were at and just pluses, so you're right, adds 150 plus the 60 from Adarza Kavat equals 210%. That seems pretty cool. All right, but let's look at another example now when you have a weapon that has really low crit chance. So we're looking at the Sporothrix now, 1% base critical chance. All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put the 200% critical delay mod on, but a 200% critical delay mod on a weapon that only has a 1% base comes to 3%, so it's still pretty damn garbage. But here's where Final Critical gets kind of cool. Again, Final Critical doesn't get multiplied by anything that was kind of previous to it. It just gets added at the very end of the equation. So you get that 3% plus the 60% from the Adarza, and now you have a 63% critical chance. So Final Critical is really, really good for lower critical chance weapons. You get more value out of Final Critical on lower critical chance weapons. That's not saying that you don't get value out of Final Crit on high crit weapons. It's just that you get more value on lower crit weapons. And specifically, there are certain weapons. Let me go in my little arsenal here, and I just want to pull up the Nucor real quick, Kuva Nucor. And there are other examples that are like this. I'm just thinking of the Nucor off the top of my head here. So let me just go to a blank config here. Go back out and go back in. Okay, blank config. Nothing on this build whatsoever. If you look here, the Nucor has a garbage crit chance of 7%. But look at this crit multiplier. It has a base crit multiplier of 6.2, which is friggin' crazy. And so to have value off of that crit multiplier, you need to be upping this crit chance. But if I just put a crit chance mod on, if I go Creeping Bullseye, which is the 200% mod for secondary weapons, that 7% is only going to go up to a 21, I believe. Yeah, 21% chance, which is still pretty dookie. But with my Adarza giving me a 60% final critical, it's actually 67%. And there are other forms of final critical as well, right? There's the Arcane, I believe it's called Avenger, gives you 45 final critical. I think Kalervo has a final critical ability. Harrow, I believe, has a final critical ability. The Status of Puncture are like little tiny final critical procs. So there's a lot of little ways to get final critical, and they super, super benefit these type of weapons that are low in crit chance, but very high in crit damage. All right, let me take this off real quick so it doesn't affect anything. I don't think it would anyway. Okay, so that is what the Adarza specializes in. So let's go into the Adarza now here. We have Vengeance, my Adarza Kavat. All right, so let's look at the two specific Adarza mods. And that's going to be Cat's Eye and Reflect. Let me take my two upgraded ones down real quick. Okay, so Cat's Eye, this is the one that's going to be final critical. And, you know, the unfortunate thing with the way they have the game is they don't tell you what final critical is. You just kind of have to know what it is, unfortunately. So the Adarza Kavat is final critical, even though it just says critical chance. So Adarza Kavat grants 60% increased critical chance for 10 seconds to allies within 25 meters every 20 seconds. Okay, so that is a very powerful buff. Unfortunately, it's only a 1/3 uptime because it's a 10-second buff and then you have a 20-second cooldown. And that cooldown doesn't start until the buff is gone. So it's only a 1/3 uptime. A little bit similar to Harrow's final critical, where he has a 2/3 uptime on his 4. So Harrow has that 2/3 uptime on his 4 final critical, and this is a 1/3 uptime. So it's like kind of like a little weaker of a Harrow ability. But it's still incredibly powerful, especially for those type of weapons that can benefit from it. Okay, next we have Reflect, which is the other Adarza-specific mod. Adarza Kavat has a 40% chance to reflect damage back to an enemy, amplifying it by 60%. There are two things to reflect. The first thing is, okay, it reflects damage and it does some damage to the enemy. That's cool. It wouldn't be good enough to put on the build if that's all it did. But the other thing it does is it actually stops that damage. So it stops that damage and it reflects it. So it's not only an offensive, but it is a defensive ability. So because of that, it is very, very powerful for survivability for your Kavat. And it adds some damage as well. Okay, so those are the two specific Adarza mods. They're actually both good enough to make it on the build, so that's perfect. And let's go over the other mods for the Adarza build here. So we're going to start off with two survivability mods. This is going to be dependent on the Warframe you pick. I'm using an Inaros, which is a health and armor Warframe. So it makes sense for me to use the link mods that link my vitality, my health, and link fiber, which is link armor. Now, if you were a shield Warframe, you wouldn't be using link fiber because you don't stack armor as a shield Warframe. So you would take this off and you would link your redirection, which is linking your shields. So this is what it would look like for a shield Warframe. The other way to set up a shield Warframe is not linking your vitality, keeping on link redirection, and using hasten deflection, which will give your pet more of a shield gate potential. So either of those two options are good for a shield and adaptation Warframe. Because I'm in health and armor, I'm going to go back to my vitality and fiber. Okay, and now not all Warframes are health and armor, and not all Warframes are shield and adaptation. Some Warframes are shield gating Warframes. And shield gating Warframes do not stack health, they do not stack armor, and they do not stack shields. So in that case, you don't want to link your Warframe's poor stats, you just want to increase your pet's stats that he has. So you would use the regular mods down here. You would use Enhanced Vitality, Metal Fiber, and Calculated Redirection. You could still use Hasten Deflection too, though, with the shield gating builds. Okay, let's continue on here. So we have Synth Deconstruct next. Enemies injured by the companion have a 25% chance to drop a health orb when killed. So Synth Deconstruct combos amazingly well with the Warframe mod called Equilibrium. And it also combos decently if your Warframe just needs health orbs to heal. If neither of those two things are true for you, if you're not using Equilibrium and you don't need more healing, you do not have to use Synth Deconstruct. You could take this off and put something else in the slot. Reflect we already went over. Primed Animal Instinct is next. I'm going to keep this on my build. So this is Loot Radar and Enemy Radar. I believe this is... I've always said that I believe Primed Animal Instinct and Fetch are mandatory. And even now the new Retriever mods. Although I've kind of went against my own rule on the Kavats, and it's because Kavats have very, very good mods for them. And so there's actually other mods that might go over Primed Animal Instinct. So let me go over those real quick, because you might not care too much about Primed Animal Instinct. You may want to use some of these other Kavat mods. Let me just kind of try to separate them so they're not all together here. Okay, let's talk about Tech Enhance first, because Tech Enhance is pretty close to being on the build. And again, you could probably, if you did not want to run with Primed Animal Instinct, you could take this off and you could run Tech Enhance. So Tech Enhance is a 30% Kavat ability duration increase. The only thing we have that has duration is Cat's Eye. Now, Cat's Eye is incredibly powerful. The downside to Cat's Eye is the 20-second downtime and the only 10-second uptime. Now, Tech Enhance will turn that 10-second uptime into about a 13.5, like 13 to 14-second uptime instead, which it's up to you. Do you want to spend a mod slot for 3 or 4 seconds more of uptime? Granted, it's on a mod that's incredibly powerful, but it is only 3 or 4 seconds. So you could consider putting Tech Enhance over Primed Animal Instinct if you believe that it was worth it. I'm on the fence there. I like Primed Animal Instinct. It really has to be something amazing for me to want to take off Primed Animal Instinct, but you could consider this. Tech Assault is really good for Kavats. This is a good survivability mod. Kavat has a 60% chance to ignore lethal damage and become immune for 4 seconds. The reason I'm not using it on this build is because we already have Reflect. Reflect acts as an additional defensive mod that the Adarza gets specifically. So for the Adarza, I don't believe he needs Tech Assault, but if you're playing a shield gating Warframe and you're not using like the link mods and you're using like the regular ones, his survivability does kind of go down a little bit further, and so you could consider Tech Assault as well on a shield gating Warframe. The other one here, Fear Sense. The Kavat senses weaknesses of enemies within 25 meters, and then for 25 seconds, its attacks deal 200% damage and stagger with a 30% chance of knockdown. This is very powerful. This could go on the build. I personally don't feel like, for me personally, I want to take Primed Animal Instinct off for this. I don't believe it's powerful enough for me to consider taking it off, but you might. There are a lot of people who run without Primed Animal Instinct, and that's completely fine. You could put Fear Sense over Primed Animal Instinct if you would like it. It is very powerful. There's a lot of things on forums, I cannot confirm this, but a lot of people are saying that 200% is multiplicative. Personally, I doubt that. There's not a lot of multiplicative sources that are in the hundreds. Like, there's like 2 sources I could think of, which is Kalervo and the Glaive's Power Throw. But like most multiplicative sources are not like 200 and over %. So I have a feeling this is additive, but it could be multiplicative. A lot of people are saying this is multiplicative. Okay, next we have Pounce here. The Kavat pounces at an enemy, dealing 90% damage and stunning them for a short duration. So this is kind of mediocre. However, we're going to be using a mod on the claws called Swipe. Swipe makes your Kavat, instead of hitting 1 dude at a time, hit 5 dudes at a time. The other thing it does is it increases your range by 2 meters. That range also affects Pounce. So Pounce becomes kind of like a little AoE ability instead of a 1 dude ability. So Pounce is okay. Pounce could also make it over Primed Animal Instinct. Although, to be fair, I think for all these picks, I feel like either Fear Sense or that extra 3 or 4 seconds with the ability duration is probably your best options. Let's go over the last good option. Territorial Aggression is not very good. It's more of like a roleplay thing. But Sharpened Claws is the next okay option. So a vicious attack dealing 300% damage that sunders armor by 120%. So this is actually a full armor strip. The only thing is that it does not interact with Swipe. So how Swipe, I said, hits 5 dudes at a time. Sharpened Claws is still only going to hit 1 dude at a time. It also doesn't interact with duplex bonds, so your clones aren't going to be armor stripping. So it's still only your main Kavat that's going to be doing it. He does it somewhat often. It's not like on a super short cooldown, but it's not on a super long cooldown either. It's on a pretty reasonable cooldown. So it's okay. If you just wanted an armor strip on a random enemy once in a while, Sharpened Claws is good. So you can consider these top 3, I believe, are going to be the stronger ones over the Primed Animal Instinct slot if you don't want Primed Animal Instinct. Or Of course, if you're not using Synth Deconstruct because you're not using Equilibrium or you don't need health, you could also put one of them in that slot as well. Okay, let's continue on. So we have Contagious Bond. When your companion kills an enemy afflicted with a status effect, 50% of that status effect spreads to other enemies within 9 meters. So Kavats are really good at magnetic spreading and puncture spreading. So Contagious Bond helps further spread those statuses. Duplex Bond is similar. It's also going to be a good spreader. So your companion will clone itself each time you expend 100 energy, up to 3 clones. Clones live 30 seconds and cannot use abilities. So they're not going to be using like the Cat's Eye or the Reflect or anything like that. But they're still going to be whacking dudes. They're still going to be spreading statuses. And their kills have a 50% chance of dropping an energy orb, which is just a little added bonus. Tenacious Bond is incredibly powerful, and it works on the Adarza Kavat. So this will give your Warframe weapons a 1.2 times crit damage multiplier, which is really powerful. So how you activate this is your pet needs to have a critical chance over 50%, which the Adarza does. The Adarza has a very high critical chance. With Bite. I think without Bite, he doesn't have over 50%, but you always use Bite on every build, so that's no issue. Cat's Eye we already went over. And Fetch is, it's kind of like Vacuum, except for companions. It just scoops your loot up for you. So that's why we use that. So that's how you build out the Adarza. Let's go ahead and look at the Adarza's claws. And we're going to see how to build this out here. Okay, so we're going to start with the posture, and there are 2 options for the posture. There is Assassin posture and Protector posture. So let's read Assassin posture first. The companion will prioritize Eximus and other high-ranking enemies, and you get a plus 300% overguard damage. So Assassin posture really makes sense because your dude is putting magnetic procs. We haven't really got to why he's putting magnetic procs. He's putting magnetic procs because of this combo that we're going to get to eventually, which is Bellringer and Magnetic Strike. So he produces a lot of magnetic procs through that. But Assassin posture is going to make him prioritize the dudes that actually have overguard, and those are the dudes that magnetic procs actually kind of like do their thing on. So it makes sense to use Assassin posture with Magnetic Strike and Bellringer. Now, why do I think Protector posture is as competitive or possibly even better than Assassin posture? So Protector posture is the companion will prioritize attacking enemies within 15 meters of the Warframe, and attacks inflict +4 puncture procs. Puncture procs are +5 final critical for each proc, and so +4 procs would be a +20 final critical. And just like we explained in that slide, final critical is just an addition to the end. So if the Adarza Kavat's buff gave +60, this would just be +60 plus +20 from the puncture procs, which would be +80 over whatever the ending value of critical chance was on the weapon, which is quite good for weapons that are really bad in critical chance. So why do I think Protector posture is as competitive or better than Assassins? It's because Kavats spread a crap load of statuses, and it's because of Swipe. Swipe allows them to hit 5 enemies at a time. They're getting forced procs with the impact tier from Ringer. So forced procs don't even take your status chance into account. They just happen regardless. So they're getting 4 impact procs that are turning into 4 magnetics. The puncture procs up here are also forced, so this doesn't take your status chance into account. So even though the Adarza only got a 21% status chance, it doesn't really matter. The only thing this 21 affects are these 2 elements right here, which we'll get to eventually. So you're spreading all of these little final critical buffs or debuffs around the map, and eventually it's gonna hit the Eximuses regardless, right? The Eximuses are going to get that magnetic proc from Magnetic Strike eventually. But if you wanted a more consistent time, like if you wanted the Eximuses to always get those magnetic procs when they were up, Assassin posture is going to be the best because they're going to purposely prioritize those dudes with overguard. Okay, so you can kind of make your own decision if you want Protector or Assassin. I'm going to stick with Protector. I feel like, you know, they'll get magnetic proc regardless. It just might not be instantly like it would be with Assassin posture. All right, let me stop running my mouth about that one mile. Let's continue on here. We got Bite. Bite's going to be 330 crit chance and 220 crit damage. Maul is going to be 330% melee damage. Precision Conditioning is going to be 385% melee damage, and it converts all base physical damage to slash damage. Burning Claws is going to be 330% heat, 330% status chance, and it converts all elemental damage from these claws to heat damage. I'm going to explain why I believe that slash and heat are the best, but it's only a minor improvement. I think the other things are still fine, right? If you didn't upgrade Precision Conditioning first and you upgraded like disabling conditioning, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's only going to be a minor difference. So Burning Claws, your dude's producing magnetic procs. Magnetic procs do a lot of damage to overguarded enemies like Eximuses, Thraxus, things like that. A lot of those enemies, except for the Corpus Eximuses, are going to have armor, and armor acts as a further weakening to that large enemy. So not only do you have the magnetic that's weakening them, but you have a partial armor strip that's weakening them as well. That's why I believe Burning Claws is the best. I think it is absolutely the best if you go with Assassin's Posture. If you go with Protector Posture, like I'm going with, I think it's kind of like between Burning Claws or Shocking, because Shocking is still pretty decent. Like it's an AoE dot. So if you go with Protector Posture, you could probably switch back and forth between Burning or Shocking, whichever one you like. But if you go with Assassin Posture, pick Burning Claws. Okay, Precision Conditioning for the Slash here. Why do I think Slash is the best? It comes down to the Kavat's like slow attacks and low status chance. So the status chance is only 21%. So 1 out of 5 attacks is going to produce a natural proc. Most of the time, that natural proc is going to be heat. It's not even going to be your physical element. So in the very, very off chance that you produce your one physical proc, what one physical proc would be the most beneficial? We have Disabling Conditioning's Puncture. One puncture proc is only 5% final critical. It's nice, but it's not that big of a deal, only one of them. And we're also, because we're using Protector Posture, we're also probably just going to be capping out dudes on puncture procs anyway. So a lot of times they're going to be at their cap. Brute Conditioning. What does one impact proc do? Well, one impact proc is actually kind of decent because it does turn into a magnetic proc because of Magnetic Strike. However, Magnetic does have a cap also at 10, and we're producing a lot of magnetic procs because every time that dude hits, he's producing 4 impacts, which are turning into 4 magnetics. You're probably going to be at cap for magnetic like pretty quick as well. So a lot of times that one impact proc may not actually even do anything because you'll be at cap already. Okay, and then finally, one slash from Precision Conditioning. What does one slash do? Well, it's a dot. Slash is a dot, and the damage of the dot is dependent on the weapon. If you have a weapon that does little piddly damage, the dot is going to be a little piddly dot that doesn't do a lot of damage. This weapon, the Adarza Claws, of course, this is without crit multipliers taken into effect, but it's pretty decent, you know, pretty decent damage here. So it's going to be an okay, it's going to be like a moderate slash proc. And Slash is pretty good, you know, bypasses armor and everything. So I feel like you would get the most out of Slash. It's actually going to do some decent damage. Whenever it procs, it's probably just going to tick that dude down and kill him. But there is probably a case to be made that Brute Conditioning might also be good as well because of that magnetic proc. So you can kind of make that decision yourself. Precision Conditioning or Brute Conditioning. Okay, now let's go on to the bottom row here. Hunter Synergy. Hunter Synergy is going to be dependent on the weapon. Because again, like we were saying, Adarza Kavat... Well, let me read Hunter Synergy first. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So Hunter Synergy. Plus 30% of your primary weapon's critical chance is added to your companion. Okay. Now, we were saying that the Adarza Kavat really combos with weapons that have bad critical chance. So, depending on how bad that critical chance is, you might not want to use Hunter Synergy because, like, if it's a Sporothrix at a 1% critical chance, Hunter Synergy is not going to be doing anything. So, depending, like, if it's more of a hybrid weapon, I would probably still keep on Hunter Synergy. But if it's a weapon that is really hurting on that crit chance and it's not really that great, you have 2 other considerations you can do. You can do Cull the Weak in this slot instead. So Call of the Week is 60% melee damage per status type affecting the target. So this is kind of like you're priming for your pet. It's kind of like the opposite of what usually happens. So you prime for your pet and he's doing more damage. Granted, he can still prime for himself too, right? Like he's producing magnetic, puncture, and then heat sometimes. So it's going to give him a little bit of flat melee damage, which is nice. Although we already have a lot of flat melee damage, right? We already have Maul with 330 melee damage, and we have Precision Conditioning with 385 melee damage. So, you know, would it be better than Hunter Synergy, like if you were using the Sporothrix? Yeah, absolutely. But even like a hybrid weapon, Hunter Synergy would probably still be better than Call of the Week here. So the other option over Hunter Synergy, if you're using a really bad crit chance weapon, would be Immunity Resistance, which is increasing the status damage of your attacks. So this will be increasing your Adarza Kavat's slashes and heat, which is okay, but remember the Adarza Kavat also has a really bad status chance, so he's not going to be producing a lot of those natural procs there. But it's also decent there, especially if you were using a weapon that was completely garbage in the critical chance category there. All right, so those are the two options over Hunter Synergy if you're using a really bad crit chance weapon. Which, to be fair, like we were saying, the Adarza is kind of specializing in that. So there's a good chance you could be using a weapon that's really bad in crit chance. All right, next we have Swipe. Swipe is going to strike 4 additional enemies and increase attack range by 2 meters. This changes your Adarza Kavat's regular attack. So now instead of just whacking 1 dude, he's whacking 5 dudes, or however many are in range, right? If only 2 are in range, he's going to be hitting 2. But if 5 dudes are in range, he's whacking all 5 dudes at a time. It's freaking crazy. That's why we use Swipe. Very, very powerful there. And then finally, last 2 slots, we have kind of the combo, which is Bell Ringer and Magnetic Strike. So Bell Ringer is melee attacks, knock down enemies, and apply 4 impact status effects. And Magnetic Strike turns impact status effects into magnetic procs. So that's the combo, and that's how you build out the Adarza Claws. I'm going to go back here, and yeah, I think that's about it. I don't think there's a reason for me to do gameplay to showcase Cat's Eye. It's a 60% final critical buff, and same thing with Reflect. There's not really a reason for me to show off Reflect. It just stops some damage to the pet, and it causes some damage to the dude that attacked him. So yeah, that's the Adarza Kavat done with. If you guys like the video, consider giving it a like. If you haven't subbed yet, consider subbing or tell me what I can do to earn your sub. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.